and thank you very much for joining this session in the conference. In this lesson, and again, this is the joys of working from home, have all sorts of sirens and noise coming in from outside the house. I'm going to be, the session is entitled Easy Integrations with Third-Party Tools and Hubs, and I mentioned Cloud Elements, Zapier, and I'm going to show you another things. But I really want to go into, first of all, explaining the APIs, explaining the importance of those, because we've got a very powerful set of APIs. Now, here we go. I'm going to start the presentation. I want to explore really how really the APIs I've just talked about are being made central to Sage's plans for Sage CRM, and really how the product is being opened up for integration through its SDK, through developer resources, and through third-party tools. So here we are in this slide, and what I want to say here is that really we've got an environment in which we've got different APIs that can be used for connecting all sorts of different cloud-based services. The REST API that we've got within the product was introduced in Sage CRM 2019 R2. There are actually three types of web service within Sage CRM, and these are the basic interfaces that could be used for integration. There's the SOAP, the classic SOAP integration, which adheres to the SOAP protocols, the SData 1.1 standard. Now that's used across multiple Sage products, and it's really a form of web service. It is based on RESTful principles, but it is, and by RESTful principles I mean representational state transfer, but the SData API is read-only and it returns XML. Our REST API grew out of the SData 2 specification, but it's really taken a turn away that's sufficiently different to allow us to be able to call it a different API rather than SData. It's fully CRUD, and it handles data in JSON format, and so the REST API is also generally simpler in detail than the SData equivalent, and it's much broader in functionality. Now, our interface options, therefore, for integration within the cloud essentially boil down to REST and SOAP. This is the powerful basis for any of the integrations with third-party systems. So it's especially true when we need to exchange data between systems scattered through the web. Both the SOAP and the REST API allow for a remote system to perform authenticated actions inside Sage CRM. So it's fully CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. Now, in terms of the design and differences between SOAP and the REST API, one thing I should call out is that the REST API is still being developed and extended, and that's something that will come up again and again, I think, in this presentation. If we handle just something like this, a connection through to a table, this is an extract of a WSDL within the SOAP environment. Now, this is how the web services description language is how in XML an entity inside Sage CRM is exposed as an endpoint. The user entity is exposed to web services. It's described in this very, very restricted structure, and it has really quite a restricted understanding of what the entity is and what fields may be exposed to it. The REST API, on the other hand, because of its roots within the SData API, it uses broadly the same settings that we would have. There are only some slight differences between SData and REST when it comes to exposing a table to the API. We have a set of REST API documentation that it lists certain entities that have been tested and are officially supported for CRUD actions. But the point is that when it comes to things like the SOAP web services has this very strict, limited understanding of within the WSDL that has only limited schema discovery, But the REST API uses a dynamically generated schema that can be interrogated and discovered. So it's much easier to be able to look into the REST API and to be able to discover what fields are available, what entities are available. Now, if you've been working for Sage CRM, then you probably know about these types of discovery elements through SData. The SData 1.1 API. Now, it's true that the REST API had its inception within the SData specification, but it is certainly moved away in such a way. So we have this prototypes mechanism which allows us to discover information about the system, and then we can also go down and get the individual details of the entity that we're concerned with within the prototypes as well. And if we are exposing a table to the REST API, it has to be exposed within this SData flag at the moment. Now, there is a price to pay for starting to expose tables to the REST API which are not defined, really encompassed within the REST API, but I'll mention a little bit about that later on. Now, I've been muddying the waters perhaps a little bit about talking about, and the REST API is like SData, it comes from SData, but in fact they are different APIs. They are not the same. The two APIs have different endpoints and they have different internal behavior. The SData API is read-only, returning XML. It's frankly, I find it more difficult to use and to work with. The REST API is fully CRUD. The data comes back in JSON format, and the REST API is generally simpler to use. But what you'll find is that our API has been introduced with a version which says v1.0.0 beta. So why do we classify this as being a beta API? What does it signify? Well, it doesn't mean that we're not anything other than fully committed to the API. It's still being developed, it's still being extended, but it's not a fixed and done API like many of the other APIs that you've probably used inside Sage CRM. It's not like the COM API, the .NET API, and it's certainly not like the SOAP API or even the SData API, which are done and dusted. What's so exciting about working with the REST API is that it is, it's knowing that it's very, very, it is fundamental. Any new features within Sage CRM are being used with the expectation that we are using the REST API to implement those. So all new feature development uses the concept of the REST API. And it is one of the strategic drivers of the roadmap. So one of the strategic drivers, or I should say part of the strategic drivers of the roadmap, is the desire to make the product more accessible and attractive to developers to create exciting extensions and integrations for the product. So this is placing far more emphasis on the APIs than ever before. Every change that we make in a release becomes really an improvement to, or it's related to, Sage CRM's integration capabilities. Now, I'm going to mention in a moment some of the changes made in Sage CRM 2020 R1, and again that we're introducing in 2020 R2, where we've incrementally improved the integration with MailChimp. But these improvements that we do there actually have benefits for other integrations, and here that I'm showcasing it now. I'll might as well say now, I'm talking about the ability to enforce the uniqueness of email addresses for contacts, and email addresses can be used to link with other systems. I will talk about that more in a moment. But this is where we can start looking further ahead into what we hope is going to happen within the roadmap. Now, looking ahead and beyond our current version of the API, we want to be adding services that allow for document upload and management. We want to be able to do metadata inquiry, so you can find out the metadata for screen objects, maybe call the translation service. This would all allow for separate screens to be built inside Sage CRM CRM, maybe using things like Carbon or React libraries to be able to create things which are fully using the metadata inside Sage CRM. We want to be able to have quick ways of invoking searches for being able to perhaps drive workflow as well as a service. What about new mechanisms for being able to interact with user information for preferences and settings, for calendars, for notifications and alerts, and be able to do more heavy duty jobs like batch processing for data insert, update and delete. So all this is coming within the APIs, and we are though moving. What that means is that we're working with a moving target. So Sage CRM, the REST API is not static. You've just seen that we've got a lot of ambitions for it. This explains why we've still got this as a beta classification and why we're very, very cautious in describing its usage as really only supporting core entities as described in the documentation, because we have to think defensively about the experience of upgrades. So we are definitely going to be thinking about the future, but the idea if a developer turns on access to a table inside Sage CRM via the REST API so that there are customization screens, but if those are not covered by the existing API, then we could run into risks or problems in the future. Especially if you were to think about changing some tables, like a metadata table, and exposing it to the REST API, that could have quite profound implications. So we have to be very cautious about what we do with the API. Now, the beta classification is another reason why the API is in its own guide rather than being rolled up into the developer guide. But there is also a practical reason for this, in that the REST API is generated automatically from within the code base, so its origin is actually pretty much different from the remainder of the written documentation. Now, there are going to be changes, there are going to be additions, enhancements and bug fixes to the REST API within each release, and these changes are going to be detailed in the release notes. But for the foreseeable future, I don't see, and that's been the next couple of releases, I really don't see us necessarily changing the version designation just yet, until it's much more practical. Now, I mentioned release. This actually allows me, or gives me, an excuse to talk about the introduced feature, or feature that was introduced in Sage 2020 R1, and this is a feature that does improve integration capability. Now, in the release notes, it says to ensure that a person, company or lead record being added to the system has a unique email address, system administrators can now use a new detect duplicate emails option. And this is just a tech checkbox. We've been listening for a while to global customers and partners about how we can improve the experience of the integration with MailChimp, especially how we can easily prevent and fix duplicate email addresses in groups sent to MailChimp. But this feature is more than about simply improving the experience for MailChimp. And we all know that the MailChimp integration is fantastic. From within Sage CRM, we can export contacts. Those contacts may well have started off as accounts contacts deep within Sage 100 or Sage 300. So we can export contacts, we can create a segment within an audience, we can create a new campaign that can be delivered through email, it can also be delivered through social media. The success of the call to action contained within the email or social post can be traced all the way back to the orders placed in a website, back into the underlying accounting system. We have a closed system now. We have a virtuous loop where we can see things all the way through. And we've developed the unique email feature inside Sage CRM 2021, and then we're also doing some more work with it in 2022. So why is the unique email idea so important? Well, it's really part of this concept of omnichannel. If we consider any of our customers, then they probably have to admit that they habitually use different channels to connect with a business. So contact management at its basic level has to be this omni-channel a la carte approach that customers have in contacting an organization. So it's not unusual for customers to use at least 3 different mediums, like social media, like chat, like email, to contact an organization. And it's probably the case that most businesses think they could do a better job in providing a better experience to those customers through any of the channels. Now, the uniqueness of the email address is just one part of this. So whether our customers are interacting with a business using Facebook, using Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, that they'll nevertheless have an active email account behind that. And the email remains the most common way to contact a business, and this is important whether we're dealing with business to business or business to consumer type businesses. Within a business to consumer context, people often keep their email for ages, unlike postal addresses and mobile IDs, which change because people, after all, move, they change jobs, they buy new phones, but typically they'll keep their email address for years. And if customers are interacting with a business on multiple channels, and if we want to be able to enable a unified view on those different types of communication within the CRM, then using an email address as the common denominator provides the best way of achieving this. So that's why in Sage CRM 2020 R1 we introduced the ability to enforce uniqueness for the main business email address, for the lead, for the company, for the person, entities. And this feature can now be used for identity matching across multiple apps and contact points. And email is better than lots of other mechanisms such as cookies, as cookies don't get shared between devices and browsers and can be very, very easily blocked. So email is probably one of the most reliable central identifiers to use because customers use email to log into their apps, their browsers, their websites across channels and devices, and by forcing a unique email address, this gives the ability to connect each identifier and create a single unified picture of our customers. The disparate data points or data sources such as postal addresses, mobile IDs, social media handles can all be stitched together through using the email addresses. So, what about the different developer tools that are out there? We've set the scene. We know we've got tools like the REST API. We know we've got mechanisms for providing a way of amalgamating different systems and integrating different systems, and we have increasingly visibility on the Sage Business Cloud Marketplace for Sage CRM for CRM components. Now it's starting off slowly. We've got fantastic ISVs like Greytrix with their Gumu integration being listed here, and we're expecting in the course of the next 12 months more either full-scale integrations by larger ISVs like Greytrix to appear on the marketplace. That's whether it's in the UK or whether it's in the North American or wherever marketplace we have. But we also expect to see other marketplaces, little cataloging systems to be opened up as well, where you can look at integrations and extensions. Probably something very important to understand is that we're trying to get a greater exposure of information for Sage CRM within the developer platform as well. We've got an increasingly diverse range of different integrations taking place within other Sage products. We have obviously Sage 100, Sage 300, but there's increasingly a desire to integrate with products such as Intact as well. And so it's really good that we can see an intention to move the Sage CRM REST API documentation into developer.sagecrm within the next year. And Sage CRM already has a presence within the context of developer.com because Sage CRM was in the first wave of the development of the canonical APIs provided through Cloud Elements. And there's not just large-scale integrators like Cloud Elements that are there providing those sort of pipeline integrations, but also there are tools like PySync coming. Now, this is a new ISV, newly signed up, but they're working with Sage CRM, and on a different scale. You have partners such as Leading Edge in Romania creating Zapier integration apps, and that allows you to create all sorts of interesting mashups of data across different systems. So it's a very useful thing, but you can even roll your own if you're confident enough and you want to be able to do this. If this then that is another fantastic platform to use. Very, very easy to be able to do those changes. Well, that I've taken you on a very quick run through the development of the ecosystem and the way in which we can ease integration with other systems. So that just about wraps up what I wanted to say about Sage CRM's APIs. I hope that was of use to you. There's plenty of space on Sage City to be able to explore questions around that, see where we're going. So please do engage us in conversation around the future of the APIs and how we can build better and stronger integrations. Thanks very much.